Welcome to Elevate, the podcast where we dissect exceptional achievers who are consistently raising the bar personally and professionally to produce extraordinary results in investment real estate and ultimately in their lives. Now here's your host, Tyler Chesser.
Welcome back, Elevate Nation. We are excited today because we have a phenomenal guest. And as you know, really what our goal here is to continue to raise that bar, identify and apply how the best of the best are making it happen really in, personally, professionally, in real estate and beyond. And so today we're excited because it's truly a masterclass. I mean, we're trying to build a community here for leaders, who are looking to achieve uncommon results and maybe already are achieving uncommon results. And certainly, my friend Dylan here, Dylan Marma with Rand Partners is in that category. And so we're excited to have him. Dylan, how are you, sir?
I'm excited to be here. Even that intro is powerful, and it's great to be one of the first few guests on the show here, Tyler, and really appreciate you having me.
Absolutely, my friend. So a little bit about Dylan. Dylan began his real estate career in 2015, and he quickly rose to a leadership role in residential and commercial real estate with an investment company in San Diego. And I know he's originally from sort of the New York area, so that was obviously quite a change there in terms of geography. But he began investing in residential real estate at that time, and he started to learn how to evaluate markets and manage properties remotely. And then from there, in early 2018, Dylan joined the team with Rand Partners. So I think it was just about a year ago now, really.
Yep.
And so what he was able to do then is sort of expand additional markets throughout the Southeast, as well as build out systems to open the doors for outside investors to partner through syndication through their platform. And Dylan spends a lot of his time analyzing and underwriting new opportunities out of their home office in Knoxville, which is really where, Dylan and I began our relationship together, just through looking at deals, looking at opportunities. And he works closely with brokers in their target markets and plays a role as a frontline contact with investors upon introduction and throughout the entire holding period for asset management and communication. So Dylan, a lot of times we live behind our bios in this world, right? So, everybody, we all have our story, but fill in the gaps here, man. If you don't mind, share with me a little bit of an elevator pitch, so to speak, for the Elevate Nation.
Yeah. So, you said there, really, wear a lot of hats, right? And I think that's the simplest way to put it, right? We all wear a lot of hats. You're in an entrepreneurial environment, growing a business, right? And I think it's hard to just put a title or a bio that really covers everything you do day to day. But pretty much, I became really enamored by the concept of syndication and the way that works and private offerings work in real estate. And after evaluating each asset class, I really saw multifamily just having the most strength and giving me all everything I needed to really believe in this for the long run, right? So I went heavily into multifamily about 2 years back, where I once I made the commitment, it was just a daily grind of underwriting deals, doing everything I could to absorb all the education I get my hands on, whether it was books, trainings, videos, live events, right? We all go through that phase, right, where we're in. It's an ongoing process, but eventually, the education starts coming from doing and from all your connections and things like that, right? It kind of shifts. But I went for about a year, just immersed myself to where once I made the commitment, there was no days off, and just training and educating and going. Well, I was still working full time as a sales manager, and and eventually made the leap to come out to Atlanta, and shortly after up here in Knoxville, when I began working with Jake and Gino, who also run the podcast Wheelbarrow Profits. They had picked up 900 units with just in-house equity between the three of the partners. And then I began to, I came in because I had been working alongside Vinny Chopra, who's done several $100 million in syndications, and we became close friends. I got to learn a lot of the systems on how to go about doing it. And that's the value that I brought to the table, right? So everyone always asks, how do you get involved? How do you get a start? It's really tough to just give one crystal clear answer. It looks very different for everyone, right? I found a way to seek to serve, through adding value and filling in gaps in different areas, right? And in this instance, when I began working with Rand, it was the idea that I was able to add the additional bandwidth and the additional know-how to help, facilitate syndications, to bringing to building up the investor base, to keeping the investor base warm, to being able to play the role of the asset manager. And then also we've been expanding, as you know, into different markets as well, and starting to build more broker relationships and growing like that. So that's my elevator pitch.
I love it, my man. So how did you inherently know that multifamily was a path that you wanted to take a leap into?
Yeah, so multifamily, I mean, right now there's a lot of buzz around multifamily, right? And I think you're going to hear a lot of the same answers, but I would say that, for me, I saw that it was just something that, I personally had lived in apartments for many years, and I didn't see, I guess I fit the stereotype of the millennial that doesn't really care for home ownership, because I don't want to deal with all the hassle of the maintenance and the upkeep. And I like the idea of being somewhat, the portability concept of that multifamily provides. And then in addition, I just saw, the drivers of people moving down to the Southeast. I saw the drivers of, people, having kids later on in life, more single parent households. And, just there's a lot of demographic shifts that are taking place that make multifamily an asset class that makes a lot of sense. Not to mention there's a lot going on in other sectors of real estate, right? And I think, you've seen the transformations that have taken place with retail, and you've seen a lot of shifts in industrial, right? So I think multifamily just felt like a secure place, and especially when you're raising other people's money and capital. I always say, I'd be more willing to gamble or risk my own capital than I would ever be for someone else's, right? And anyone that goes to say that when you're syndicating a deal, you're not taking on the risk, I think you're taking on the biggest risk, because your reputation is on the line every step of the way, and that means a whole lot more than any amount of money in my eyes.
I love it, man. Well, one thing that I know about you, and I know that you share this passion that I do, is you have had to develop yourself to a point where you can be effective in the space, and it's evident with everything that you do, whether it's sharing content on your own or just as who you are, which I've always appreciated. One of the things that Dylan and I first connected on was really like books, like what book are you reading right now, and a lot of the things that you've got to continue to kind of raise that bar, and that's really the whole essence of what we're discussing on Elevate is, real estate is sort of that practical solution towards, obviously, look, you've got to have dollars and cents to be able to survive in today's society. But beyond that, to be able to thrive in what you're doing, whether it's in real estate or, business or anything else, you've really got to develop your own skills and professional know-how. And so I'm curious to know from you, Dylan, what was there one or two events? And if so, what were they that caused you to draw like a line in the sand and say, look, I'm taking responsibility, I'm taking control for my life, and I'm taking massive action?
Man, there really is, right? I think most of us have that. So I think it's a powerful question in itself. When people ask me, what would you do if you were 13 years old or 15 years old and to do it all over again, right? And it's not like, I would have just started a business sooner or started to work more and save up money sooner. It's usually I would have started reading sooner, right? And I would have started investing more into myself and treating myself differently and the way I spent my time, because I'm a huge reader, huge learner. I think matching work ethic with your work ethic that you put into your study is equally important, right? To block off and be disciplined to an hour a day or more of reading, educating, watching videos or something like that, because that's helped me grow leaps and bounds. And for me, I take back to about 19 years old when I actually was, I was in school and I was living the, fraternity college lifestyle, which was just, a lot of partying, a lot of going out. And it was just not healthy habits, right? And it was not getting me well, on paper it looked good, and I was going kind of the traditional route, and I was going for accounting, and grades were fine, right? It wasn't a grades thing. It was just more of a matter of, I knew that what I was doing day to day was not like building myself up for the habits. And then there's just a bunch of other challenges that took place all in a short period of time, and I basically hit a rock bottom point when I really just looked at myself and I said, listen, like I need to change something, right? Because I've always had these visions and aspirations of like building a business or at that time I wanted to live in California, which I ended up doing not long after. And I had this whole there was some kind of a vision there, but I said what I'm doing is not getting me to that, right? So So I did draw a line in the sand, and I actually left school at that point, right? I faced a lot of adversity in doing that, right? Leaving, my good friends behind, my family thought I was nuts. And I started to get into different forms of sales and entrepreneurship. And I totally, I kind of isolated myself from a lot of the world at that point, just only surrounding myself with people that were in business or sales or something like that. And ended up moving up to San Diego when I knew hardly anyone at all in San Diego, just to get out and transform myself. And in that time period, I was obsessive with, the personal growth and all the mindset books and the reading and this and that, right? And that kind of led me into real estate, right? Because I start reading some financial education. Real estate just makes sense. So, and I think from there I kind of caught the bug, and it became easier after a year or so. You can kind of start to bring your of the extremism of just sheltering yourself and diving into this wholeheartedly. Then I kind of was able to kind of find the balance that I think made sense. But I think when you first make that transition, it is such a dramatic change, or you call it a paradigm shift that you're going through, that you need to really be obsessive with it and go all in, and then you start to build the habits, transform yourself. And I think that one period of time, that year of my life, had really changed just so much for me.
So it's really interesting. What I'm hearing from you is, it sounds like you were enjoying maybe some pleasurable activities at the time. You were partying with some friends and sort of living the life of relaxation and not a whole lot of discomfort. And perhaps over some time, you started to realize that maybe you weren't growing to a point where you weren't experiencing becoming a new person.
It was like one morning. It was one morning after waking up, super hungover and just in just like a dark place. I remember sitting there and it just hit me in the face, and I just saw I was like, what am I doing, right? And then wow. My dad had actually given me a book that had sat there for several months on the shelf. It was one of the only personal growth books he had given me. It was called Choose Yourself by James Altucher, and I just decided to pick this book up, and I read it. It was all about. It was just kind of a right place, right time thing, right? And I read the book, and it was all about creating a lifestyle by design, and how you really don't have to live by the expectations of society and a lot of these messages that you may have heard in other books. And it really hit home with me. I think it's still a great read and still something that everyone should pick up. But I remember as soon as that hit me, it really changed. And that's why they say change can truly happen in a moment, and in that case, it did.
I love it, my man. Well, I appreciate you being open and sharing that with me, because I know so many people go through the same thing, and perhaps maybe it's a wake-up call for somebody, because I know a lot of times, something is speaking to us, but we're not listening, and you got to receive that message over and over and over, but you received it, took action. So kudos to you, and I appreciate you being honest about that. So tell me, we're kind of fast forwarding, a few years here. So tell me about, Elevate's all about raising the bar, right? So how do you consistently raise that bar, and what have you been doing recently? Maybe this past 6 months. We're halfway through the year, or even this year. What are you guys doing, or you yourself doing, to consistently raise that bar?
Yeah, so I would say if we look at the last year, just that year that we just talked about was kind of transformative from a personal growth standpoint. I'd say that from a business acumen standpoint, this last year has been in many ways equally transformative, right? And I think because as taking on so many different roles and responsibilities, between truly learning how to deliver the statements the way that we want them to read, between learning how to manage the asset from the asset management and the property management side, between all of the every single day I've learned something new. This week, for instance, we're learning how to bring in an investor via tenant in common with a 1031 exchange for the first time, right? We're transitioning from, because at one point it was more cash accounting statements that we were looking at, to accrual accounting now that we bring on investor capital, right? So you're learning the ins and outs on how that's working. And then you're just running into new challenges, new opportunities, daily. So I think for me, it's just been really head down in the grind, 7 days a week lately, just going through and building the business. But from a learning standpoint, I've been able to just take so much just purely from growing what we have now. We also have, not only do we have the investment business, but I'm also involved with, we're launching a loan brokerage, right? So we're learning about the debt side of things. We're learning about, how Fannie and Freddie really do qualify this, and who the best sources are for capital, and what the pricing waivers are at a higher level than we ever knew, as we were just simply investors.
Mm-hmm. I love it, man. So from that, like, you guys you're not scared to take on new opportunities and kind of learn through the process, right?
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. Right. And I think that's where the growth comes in. Right. And I think that was part of my motivation for taking the leap, because I actually had a pretty good job, back out in San Diego. I was living by the beach. I was able to see the ocean from my office. I mean, life was pretty good. But again, it was that feeling of being comfortable. Right. And that's why I took the leap of faith to leave without much there, to go across the country and start the business. Because I think that's where we can find fulfillment and satisfaction, right? And I think it's in doing the things that are scariest to us, or doing the things that seem most challenging and that we know the least about, to ultimately put yourself up to the test. And in that process, I think I need a certain level of stimulation. That maybe not everyone needs that. Maybe some people want the comfortable job that they can kind of kiss. They can basically sit back and have that stability day to day. But for me, at least, I need the stimulation that comes from taking on a new challenge.
So you like to seek the challenge and find it, but what else has has there been any direct results that have really kind of improved the quality of your life in the short term? Or are you really playing the long game right now, or how's that been?
So one more time.
Well, so like when you're in San Diego, right? You're living a good life. You're looking at the ocean. Water's coming in. You're having a great time. You're comfortable. But now you're putting yourself into a position of discomfort, perhaps at times, continual growth. But has there been any sort of direct correlation in terms of, obviously that's a big lifestyle shift?
Yeah.
What sort of quality of life changes have you experienced with that as well?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, the one given one is definitely from an income standpoint, doing significantly better, right? And I think I was doing what many people would be very happy with at the age I was at, earning money in San Diego. But I think from just growing income and net worth, I think real estate's definitely been a fantastic vehicle for that, right? I think that's why a lot of us are in real estate, because the numbers make sense and all the tax benefits and things like that, right? Pay a lot less taxes now in real estate in the Southeast in Tennessee than I did W-2 in San Diego, right? So I think that is definitely an important one to mention. But I would say that in addition to that, I think that facing the challenges, in some ways it gives you confidence, right? And gives you confidence in all different areas depending on where the challenge is coming in. But I think it's given me an understanding on how business works from just a very broad perspective. And I think that's what's great about multifamily, because multifamily is one asset class, but so many of the principles that we learn in this asset class apply directly to the next one, whether it's development, or whether it's a different area of real estate, or whether it's even looking at technology, right? And I have friends that are in all different sectors, so the conversations I'm able to have and the thought process I have, are great. So I think it's benefited me a lot in that sense. And then just on a personal level, right? I think having more confidence in self-reliance, it always goes an extremely long way, right? And it benefits your relationships. Makes it easier to inspire those around you, and to help other people, just like you're doing through the show.
Yeah, I love it, man. And one of the things, like, for me as an example, is that I was seeking to earn more money too. Like, while I worked so hard for so long, it's like, man, I just want to make more money. And
right.
I was really driven by that. But the thing that came for me, and it sounds like the same for you, is that there's other things that also come from this effort and from this consistency and from continuing to push yourself that may not have been as apparent as you got started along this path. So I love to hear that. Yeah,
it's like Ray Dalio says, he calls it the bait, right? Like I'm sure you've read Principles as well, right? He calls it, he says, the nice like cars and the houses and stuff like that, that stuff is just the bait, right? And that kind of gets you started and gets you going. But then you find the true reward is in kind of the journey itself, and just falling in love with like all the new challenges that you do run into.
Yeah, and I feel sorry for some people who don't get to experience that, because it's one of the most satisfying things that I've ever experienced. I know you would probably agree there. And so tell me, one thing that I've struggled with, along my journey is, turning down opportunities, or, saying no, to be honest with you.
Hmm.
So what are you getting better at saying no at, or do you share the same challenge?
No, I think it's a really awesome question. When it comes to that, I'm pretty extreme about trying to protect my time, right? I feel like I'm always defending my time left and right. And I've really gained a lot of self-awareness as to who I am and how I want to lead my life for many years to come. And to me, I personally find I'm most productive when I'm sitting home or sitting here in the office with a laptop and a phone, right? And I can really go a long way. And the actions that I take just from being here in the office with a laptop and a phone can truly push the business a very, very long way. And I find that I've been doing less networking, right? I find I've been doing less of the going to the 3-day weekends and things to that effect. And for me, and that probably goes against the grain of what a lot of people will tell you need to do, right? Go to more workshops, go to more live events, do this and that, right? I'll go to a workshop if I see it being like a really great group that I really want to get around and make an impact or get to know. But for the most part, I try to protect myself and like stay in the office, stay kind of on my own solo grind or with the team here, because I find that right now with where we are as a business, that's what's going to give us like the best output. So I think the only thing that'll get me to really travel right now is either making like quality time for family, because you always have to cut that out and make the time for it, or it's or it's reconnecting with your close friends or dating, things like that. But as far as it goes, when it comes to like getting out there, there's a lot of stuff that you think is productive that's not productive, and I'm huge into like just like the idea that if you're focusing on 3 different things, and then you cut that down into one thing, it's not putting 3 times the effort into that one thing, it's putting like 9 times the effort into that one thing. There's like a multiplier effect. So the more actions that you're going to take in different areas is just really it's going to slow you down from truly being productive or seeing results in any one specific thing.
So by your own activity that if you're in the office, you're doing the things that are pushing you forward. You're not doing the lower priority tasks that may or may not be moving you where you want to go. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Exactly. I look up to the way that Mark Cuban lives. I know I've heard him talk about it before, where he really works out of home, I think, in gym shorts, and just does cell phone and emails all day. And he says he doesn't leave the house unless he's collecting a check. And I think that's just I get it, because I understand that. I think that is a way to live very, very productively. Obviously, I don't have nearly as much as someone like that does, but I think it just goes to show that even at a very high level, that system can work well.
Well, you're certainly on your way. And one thing, this is a great segue into my next question for you is, I mean, you're the type of guy who's consistent, right? And you're always on it. And you mentioned even sometimes pulling 7 day a week, even recently. What are some habits that you're consistently in, like it's non-negotiation every single day that really set you up for success?
Yep. So as of the last month or so, I've been basically the morning routine is big. I've had a morning routine for years, but I'll just share with you. I guess more recently I've been starting to incorporate running into that versus say weightlifting or something like that, right? But I always get some kind of exercise in first thing when I wake up. I enjoy the early mornings. I like some mornings I'm up as early as 5 a.m. and then I try to get some kind of an exercise in. Then it's trying to, I always make sure I'm very consistent with meditation, always at least 10 minutes of meditation. I started with the mindfulness stuff. Now I do kind of a transcendental meditation for about 10 minutes. I always do a daily journal where I write down some gratitude, big picture goals that come to mind, and then some of my daily targets. Those are the 3, and then I always make sure to read. Audiobook usually when I'm running or working out or in the car, and then I'll actually take time to physically read a different book at the same time as well. And I don't overcomplicate it. You can get crazy with your morning routines, but as long as I hit the group of those, then I know I'm in a good headspace to take on the day. And I think that it's also important that on the weekends you find some time to recharge, right? Like I say, I work 7 days a week, but also you need to do something that's going to get you to reset. Like I always try to get some time out in the sun, whether it's going for a bike ride or a long walk, or hanging with friends or something like that on Sunday mornings. Sunday's my one day I don't set the alarm. I kind of let myself sleep in, try to recharge the batteries, get some sun, do stuff that kind of re-energizes me a bit, and then I'll usually hit it for a few hours later on in the afternoon. But I think you have to have at least like that one. In my case, it's like a one morning or 2 mornings a week that you kind of use to just let loose and reset a bit. And I find that I can be pretty consistent as long as I build those routines in.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. My mornings are sacred, and honestly, if I didn't have them, I don't know, because I think we have a pretty similar morning routine, and it's a lot of fun to just continue to grow along that process, because the compound effect is so key. I mean, you can stack that type of effort. It gets more fun, by the way, over time. And also, the results come, and so that's awesome. Tell me about an investment that you've made outside of the core assets of real estate that you've made it yourself, maybe in yourself or otherwise, that's really been so key for you, even in the past year.
So this is a good one. I had a big. I guess it's the last time I've invested, over $5,000 in one shot in terms of an investment into myself. But when I was working out of San Diego, I was in a sales management role. And I was really at a crossroads to some extent of whether to go headfirst into multifamily or whether to go into some form of sales training, actually. And I was considering the idea of doing some kind of a speaking engagement or training of some sort. And I thought about who's done the both of these, or who would be a good guy to reach out to for guidance. So I actually ended up spending, I think it was $7,500 on a coaching session with Grant Cardone, who many people will know on this call, right? And I actually flew out to Miami and sat down for a few hours to basically pick his brain and say, hey, if in my position, knowing, given what you know about me, kind of gave him the background and the context of where you're coming from, what would be your next step, right? As far as direction, would you go into the sales training with my background, or would you go into more so the real estate side? And I appreciated the honesty in the feedback that I had received, and I think it's now something I've heard him state, more publicly. But he basically said, if I had done put all the same time and effort and energy that I had put into my sales business into real estate, I feel confident I'd be a billionaire by now, right? And it's since like my early 20s, right? And then that really something clicked at that moment, because he was basically like, in the sales business or the influencer business, it's just not scalable, right? And you can only go so far, but you always have to be there to be the business, right? And it's just not something you can truly scale, and that limits you from the amount of wealth you have to create. And again, it's not all about the money like we're talking about, right? If either one makes you more fulfilled, definitely understand that. I think just with me, I also see that creating wealth is something we all want to do, and also the lifestyle balance of not burning out. Because I remember him saying it is a burnout to do the influencer thing to some degree, right? Because you feel like you always have to be on stage, you always have to be in front of the camera, right? So it's kind of the lifestyle thing as well, to be able to create true wealth, but also have some level of lifestyle balance. That you need to really enjoy everything that life has to offer. And from that day back, that I really haven't looked back. So I thought some people thought I was crazy spending that much on a coaching session, right, for a couple hours. But for me, it was the best investment I could have made, right? Because it helped me take that next step and helped me fully commit and helped me not have that lingering in the back of my head of what if I had done this business or that, So for me, it was well worth it.
That's awesome. And what a leap of faith too, to chunk over $7,500 for a couple of hours. I mean,
yeah,
sure you were making good money, but still it was definitely a leap of faith, because who knows? I mean, and it's amazing because it's all about the result, right? It's about the result that came from that, which
right.
I'm sure you can look back and say your return on investment there was substantial. So
absolutely.
So tell me, so on that note, who are your role models? I mean, who do you try to, obviously success leaves clues. So who do you try to model what you're doing after?
So lately, I would say the biggest role model, the biggest guy I've spent a lot of time studying is Ray Dalio. I know I had the Principles reference earlier. That's a book that I didn't just read once. I probably read it through, not really counting, but probably 7 or 8 times, right? And something that I will constantly reference. And I'm also reading a lot of his other articles in terms of his take on capitalism and the political system and different things like that. Because I think he really does provide a pretty objective outlook, and there's a lot of wisdom behind his teaching. So I found that he's someone that provides true information with limited bias, and I think that there's a lot to be said about that, because a lot of times there's folks that we might follow and they might have great success track record, but there's a lot of bias behind their point of view. So when you can find someone that can kind of see both sides of the coin and project that and show you the pros and the cons of the different things that are going on in the markets, I think it's so valuable. And I've also really appreciated the idea of thinking of yourself like a machine, thinking of your business like a machine, and kind of looking at things from that objective light. Because one of the big things for me right now in our business is thinking, how can we basically duplicate every single thing that we're doing and record. We've been recording a lot of videos of every single, even the simple things on how to add a new investor to our CRM system or whatever it might be, right? And we'll literally record the exact process of doing that, so you could plug someone in and basically have it all outlined for you. So I think I've been taking that idea of defining my own principles on a personal and a professional level, and it's made a world of difference.
Yeah, that's awesome. I really loved Ray Dalio's video that he made maybe a year or two ago, just about the economic machine. I believe it was. It was such a practical explanation of really how the economic engine works, is maybe how he described it. But I mean, the guy's a freaking genius, and he dumbs it down to a point where really anyone can understand it. And it's amazing. If that was just understood by more people, how many less problems would we have in our society? And so,
exactly.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, it could almost be, that's a great video, and it was, eye-opening for me. And at the same time, I think even someone in 5th grade could probably understand the basics of it, right? So to be able to break down such a complex thing on such an elementary level is amazing. So I definitely appreciate that. And you mentioned just changing lives. I think he's offering right now a lot of good insight as far as where. As an economy, we could make shifts in terms of how we're spending our money, and a lot of the message that I've received, and maybe it's partially the way I'm just interpreting it, but it's instead of investing so much just on the back end into say into welfare and for those that are struggling, maybe we should also invest heavily into education, right, and into the front line, the youth of our country, right? Because it's challenging when you only have a 4-year term to see the results of that. You'll never see the results of that in 4 years or 8 years if you have 2 terms, right? So that's why I think there's not always an alignment of interests when it comes to that. But he's been pushing heavily, and I think he just donated like $100 million to Connecticut school system, and he's trying to start a movement of basically investing into the youth and into the education of the future of America to keep us competitive as a country. And I think that in itself is an inspiring mission that at some point I'd love to partake in.
Well, it's extremely inspiring because, I mean, like you said, sometimes politicians really don't have the capacity perhaps to instill lasting change in society because of an unalignment of interest. Perhaps that's the wrong word, but I think it's up to folks like yourself and us and our listeners really to kind of elevate themselves to a point where then they're influencing and impacting others to a certain degree, and then also getting to a point where they can give back and they can contribute, their own time, their talents, their treasure to be able to make that true and lasting impact, because, it's just not going to be done otherwise. So we really have a lot of responsibility in that regard. So I'm really glad you brought that up. So tell me just, a few more things, and just a couple more questions for you, regarding, like you're after it every single day, but obviously you're thinking big. Like what are some goals that you're working towards right now, or maybe 1 or 2 that really inspire you?
Yeah, so I definitely became a little bit less goal oriented in some ways as of the past few months. Maybe it'll shift at some point, but I've been a lot more just process oriented, right? Where it's more so I'm just focused on the day to day and just living in the present and trying to refine everything that I'm doing and remain flexible in my approach, because it's just one of those things where right now, multifamily and as an asset class makes a ton of sense. And I hope that forever it always does, then we can keep doing the same exact systems and do extremely well for ourselves. Right. But we don't know if that's the case, right? There can be there's a lot of risks. There's a lot of things that we're not always in control of. Taxes could spike overnight and all of a sudden we have to go look for something else. Right. So there's so many different things that, could happen, and there's a lot of uncertainty out there. So I really try to focus on just, learning as much around me and just focusing on the process and in the present. But I would say as far as goals for myself, it would be nice, say over the next 10, 20 years to at some point, be managing, say, $1 billion in assets. I think, that's a goal that's exciting to think about. And I think the amount you'd learn and be able to really create a truly professional organization would be, it's inspiring for me, right? That gets me super, super excited. And then I think that's kind of in my next, like I said, 10, 20 years in life. And then I think there's going to be a point along the way where I definitely want to continue to or start truly contributing through writing and through speaking more, and getting I even have an idea for a book I'd like to launch in the next year or so. I kind of an outline. I've actually written about 80 pages, but I have some editing and things like that to do. But I would like to write and to speak along the way, to be able to share what we've been learning and what's going on day to day, and then I think long term, like I said, I think there'll be a point in life where I want to get more involved with some kind of charitable cause where I would like to make an impact. But I think the impact should be more about the message of helping others and educating others. It could be something where we try to reform the modern day school systems, or it could be something. It could end up just being more of a brand that is developed around just impacting the lives of the masses, right? So, but something to that effect, I think would be really exciting.
I love it, my man. Well, you're certainly a wise soul, and you have a lot to give. So if there's ever anything we can do, certainly reach out. But while we're here, let's dive into sort of our rapid fire section. Rare air questionnaire is what we call it. So picture yourself climbing a mountain. Obviously, the breathing gets a little bit tougher. If you're going to elevate your game, there's not many people who can last up there. So tell me, we've talked a little bit about books. Obviously, is one of the things that you and I first connected on, and you've talked a lot about Principles and Ray Dalio and many others. You mentioned some other great books, which we will certainly share in the show notes. But has there been anything other than Choose Yourself or Principles that has been one of the most impactful books that you've ever read?
One book I've read that I'm still fired up about is David Goggins' book, Can't Hurt Me. That book has gotten me waking up earlier, putting more time in at the gym, working harder, and we have a lot of folks around the office reading it as well. It's made a great impact on. So the guy is just an absolute beast. Definitely recommend checking that one out.
I love it. What's the biggest way you elevate your life on a daily basis? I know we talked a lot about your habits. If you had to pick one of those, what's the one that you will not get rid of?
Reading. Definitely reading. I drop anything else before that.
I love it. And how do you elevate other people around you?
Hopefully I know a thing or two I'm able to share. I think it's doing my best to bring, good attitude in daily and being able to share what I know and hopefully at the same time learning from what they know.
That's awesome. Well, Dylan, you've been a phenomenal guest and really, really appreciate you taking time. I know it's very valuable. So before we get off here, make sure you share with the listeners where we can all reach out to you and find you.
Yeah, absolutely. You can reach out to me, social media, Dylan Marma, DylanMarma, Instagram at Dylan Marma, LinkedIn. I believe it's Dylan Marma, if not Dylan James Marma. And then if you want to check out more on our company, it's Rand Partners LLC. It's RAND Partners LLC.com. You can check more about us. And if you want to jump on a phone call, you can go to the bottom and set up a call. We'd love to chat with anyone interested in chatting more.
Well, as you can see, Dylan is a wealth of knowledge and extremely valuable. So thanks again for spending some time with us today, and look forward to chatting with you again soon.
All right. Thanks for having me on, Tyler. Really enjoyed
Absolutely.
it. Take care.
Thank you for listening to Elevate. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to rate, review, subscribe, and pay it forward by sharing with a friend. Most importantly, take this opportunity to elevate your results by taking immediate action on what you learned. For more, visit tylerchesser.com.